Hello. Let me get my script up. Hi, welcome back to another installment of the Hen House at Home virtual event series. I am Monica Fernandez, Red Hen Press Media Manager, and thank you so much for joining us to celebrate our fall 2021 authors and their incredible books. Before we begin, we wanted to acknowledge that the land that I am broadcasting from is the occupied and seized territory of the Gabrielino, Tongva, and Kizh people. Tonight's event is all about memoirs, so we're thrilled to highlight this recently released memoir by an Indigenous author, Therese Marie Mayette. Heartberries, a memoir, is a powerful poetic memoir of an Indigenous woman's coming of age on the Seabird Island Band in the Pacific Northwest. A New York Times bestseller and Emma Watson book club pick for all those Harry Potter fans, NPR described it as an illuminating account of grief, abuse, and the complex nature of the Native experience, at once raw and achingly beautiful. It's a gorgeous book cover, so you all need to check that out. And it sounds like a beautiful book, so pick up a copy with me right now. I'm dropping the link right now. All right. I am extremely excited for this event and conversation tonight. When I read these two memoirs, I was awestruck at the beauty and the rawness of these experiences and how fearless these authors were in describing in detail what they and their families went through with so much vulnerability and emotion. It was a truly moving experience, and I'm thrilled to welcome them to the virtual stage now. Jan Beatty, hello, and Joan Nockels Wilson, hi. So,
Hello.
Jan Beatty's American Bastard, officially released yesterday, describes her journey as an adoptee trying to find her birth parents and the emotion, disappointments, acceptances, and everything in between that comes with that. The Book of Timothy, The Devil, My Brother, and Me by Joan Nockels Wilson, which comes out officially in just a few weeks on November 9th, is an intimate look into Joan's quest to find the disgraced Catholic priest that sexually assaulted her brother. It is a raw and honest look at her quest for justice and her grappling with her faith and her duty to her family. Welcome, both of you. I can't wait to get into the conversation. I have so many questions, but I wanted to start with some readings from both of you first to show the audience a glimpse of the incredible prose of your work. Jan, let's start with you.
Okay. Thanks, Monica, and happy to be here with Joan and for Red Hen. So I'm reading from my book, American Bastard, and the cover, here's the cover, if you can see it, there it goes, is me at 6 years old with a toy shotgun. And so I'm going to read the dedication of the book, which is, this is for the lost ones who never knew where they came from. This is against the ones who pretended the loss never happened. And I have a lot of quotes in this book, which I sort of consider to be voices from my family of strangers, musicians and writers. And in the first section, which is called Red Dress, you'll find the voice of Wanda Coleman, who was an amazing poet and poet laureate of LA for many years. This is Wanda Coleman. I stole it back because it was mine from the get-go. All shook up, a rumbled mama burped, and there I was. Take these rhythms as evidence, my splendid rock and roll. I'm going to start with the intro to the book. And this, again, there's an epigraph by the poet Lynn McMahon. The tree was shaken from the inside out, the party greenly winding the interior stair, then abruptly stilled, as if drunkenness, resting there, summoned the suddenly weighted doubt. Let's talk about the tree, the shaking. After the shaking is done, after the child finds out she is not of this family, that there is no one she looks like, shares blood with, that her name is not her name, her family is a lie, her entire life is a lie, there is no more tree. Maybe you're saying, I felt that way. I always thought I was adopted. Please let me stop you. You weren't. Talking about the motherless self, Betty Jean Lifton says, those who know their mothers cannot imagine what it is like to not know the woman who brought you into the world, what it is like to be forbidden by law to see her face, hear her voice, know her name. No one can imagine it because it is unimaginable. Maybe you're saying, I had the same thing. My mother died when I was 10. Please let me stop you. I'm sorry for your loss, but this is not that. As tough as that was, you know who you are. You have a family, a face, a bloodline, a medical history. And maybe you're saying, at least your family wanted you. Please let me stop you. Maybe you missed the part where I said the adoptee's family is a lie, her name is a lie, she has no grounding in the world. And besides, this chosen baby crap is the biggest lie to ever come down the pike. This is not about measuring sorrow, but this one's about you, how you can't seem to imagine, not even for a second, how it might be for someone who doesn't know who they are without boomeranging back to your own life. Try it. Try staying with the foreign idea that a baby is born, then sold to another person. Stay with it. There is the physical trauma of the broken bond. There is the erasure of the baby's entire history. There are these hands that have a different smell, a different DNA reaching for the baby, calling it theirs. Stay with that for a while. No talking. So I was born in this place called Rosalia Asylum and Maternity Hospital in the Hill District of Pittsburgh, and it used to be called like a home for unwed mothers, which is a really dated way to talk about it. But women used to go to Rosalia, have their baby, and then leave the baby there, and then it would function as an orphanage. And so I was there the first year of my life in the orphanage there. And this is referring to that time. It's called After the Tearing and Rolling. After the tearing and rolling, you are an infant somewhere, in a crib, in a room full of cribs. Someone is taking care of you. You don't know who. Who is the person who picks you up? Is it a woman? Is it a nun? There is no story in sight, no same loving face, blood of my blood face. The smells, the feel of the rolling and tearing are gone. Gone where? No face who has your face, no way of knowing who is who. What hands are these? Why are they different every time? There is no bonding taking place. The story is fractured here and forever after. Then strangers come to gaze at you, touch you, wonder about you. They decide to pluck you out of there and make you theirs. These strangers will take your name away and hide it. The government will cooperate. It will take months and months for this baby trade to be completed, a baby in exchange for money. Meanwhile, someone is feeding you. Is it a kind person? What do they smell like? You will never know these hands again. You will be taken to a strange place. People will start calling you the lucky one, the chosen baby. No one sees that your story is gone, that you are being handed off like a football. From now on, everyone will pretend that your first story never existed. They will act and want you to act as if you are one of them, their blood, their faces, their world. You know that to survive, you will have to do this, you will have to pass. But your new mother has dark hair and brown eyes. Your father has dark hair. Their noses are not like yours. Your white blonde hair shines thickly like the odd light in a bad painting. Later, you look at your cousins. They have beautiful long eyelashes, all of them the same. You value how others resemble others. You long for it. In first grade, you refuse to make a family tree. Your parents and teachers suggest you make one based on your new family. You refuse. I think that's about time. So
All right.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan. That was incredible. Your depiction of your experience as an adoptee and grappling with all of that was just so moving in this book. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Joan, let's go to you.
Well, thank you, Monica, and thank you, Red Hen Press, and thank you, Jan. I think the title of this presentation, Exposed, You've Exposed Your Soul. I'll read a little bit about mine, but more importantly, probably read about the person I hurt the most in the world with this book. Shortly after my brother came forward with what happened to him and another 3 boys came forward, the Passionist Order moved the priest who abused them to their Roman headquarters. And he had been living there about 10 years by the time I decided it was my time to go speak to him and attempt to get an admission of guilt. On my way there, I stopped in Chicago, where I grew up. And this little selection is en route to Rome with a brief layover in Chicago. Every time I see him of late, however, he doesn't seem like my father at all. The last time was just 24 hours ago on my Chicago layover. "Joni, you're here." His voice was weak and gravelly. "Hi, Dad," I said, standing just yesterday in the doorway to his bedroom. It took a few moments before I could acclimate to the urine smell coming from his sheets, thanks to the incontinence, which was in turn thanks to the prostate cancer, or rather its treatment. We're now lucky if Dad gets out of bed every 4th day. His decline was gradual. Just 11 years ago, after retiring, he was still walking 5 miles a day. That is, until he called Mom to pick him up. His heart was racing and it was hard to breathe. The angioplasty seemed to help, but then came the prostate cancer and next the kidney cancer and the laparoscopic surgery to fix it that went so long he woke up with a pinched nerve in his neck, which we mistook of a stroke. And then the spinal stenosis set in. After that came the quadruple bypass and the neuropathy caused by unregulated diabetes, which made it impossible for him to feel his feet, let alone stand. He used to get so tan working outside. Instead, his legs, right angle crossed over his left knee, were the color of alabaster ivory, bone color, sick color. "When does your next flight leave?" At least he knew why I was here and remembered it was temporary. In about 6 hours, Dad, how are you feeling?" Same. He smiled. I should have picked it up from his lisp. He still hadn't put his front teeth in today. He gave the gap grin of a 7-year-old child and an 80-year-old father. "Do you want to come into the living room, Dad?" I had no idea this would one day become an accomplishment. No, not today. I was up yesterday," he said. He lowered his leg and his sheet sagged, revealing the tube from the catheter he wore full time. I decided to go in. The bedroom was recently painted a chipper yellow, which I hoped made him happy. A year ago, my parents replaced their king-size bed with a queen, but there was still too little room to maneuver between it, 2 dressers, and the TV table, which held Dad's pills, water glasses, and crossword puzzles. A make-believe painting of the Blackburn farm in Mayo County was on one wall. A large banner imprinted with an image of Mom and Dad walking down the church aisle on the wedding day was on the other. Mom had moved a chair in from the dining room. A bit more used to the scent, I sat down on it and stretched my long legs, which I inherited from Dad, toward the bed. I carried a small red leather-bound notebook in my hand and a pen. Dad had told me just a week before he tried to write Ormache, but he just couldn't do it. He was having terrible dreams instead. My sister Julie next told me in an email, Mom and Dad decided not to write anything. They're letting go of this and their anger, and you should too. Do not be upset with them anymore. That's the way it was now. A long ago promise I had made to Tim had somehow morphed into this quest for his abuser. A person with a fine life before this shit. I am the one who can't let go, who causes disturbance for everyone, even Tim. He was supposed to have a note for me too. I was supposed to pick it up from him at his son's baseball practice. but Tim hadn't returned my calls and practice was long over. Oddly, I felt like they both, Dad and Tim, owed me. They shouldn't send me to Rome on my own to express the tsunami level of damage Ormache did to our family, with nothing for me to show him. But they didn't send me to Rome, did they? I did that all by myself. I was more timid than I thought I would be. As if I had pointed out one too many star shapes, I asked shyly, Dad, I know you couldn't write a letter, but maybe I could just write down a few of your thoughts so I get them right. Just tell me how you feel, that's all. I thought of how Abby finally convinces me to offer her a second popsicle and see the same look of parental acquiescence in my dad's face, even though his daughter is 47. He knew I wouldn't go away unless he tried. Okay, Joan, get out your pen. Here goes. Surprisingly, he dictated his thoughts like a letter and I wrote them down, word for word. Dear Father, I do not even know where to start. I continually do not have rest in my mind. What you have done has been an evil ordeal to my family as a whole. I continually have to resist the notion that this is what God wanted his church to be like. I believe the evil portrayed by you and others like you had been put in place by the evilness of evil, the devil, of whom you have fallen in league. I will not and cannot take part in this by acts of violence to my God. It destroys all notions of what I believe and why we existed. You have terribly corrupted the notion of goodness that God wants us to be. We are taught to forgive one another our sins, but how can we when you offer no apology to so many you have hurt, especially first Tim and our family, of whom you had many times took refuge? Took refuge. His words seemed so medieval, but perhaps this was what my father had become, a relic of old school Catholicism. Dad continued, thinking of the shame you have brought still brings tears to my heart, but I stand resolute in my faith and even pray somehow that you will find forgiveness. Then he stopped, seemingly done. So I implored, what about when Tim was 16, when he tried to tell you? Do you have anything to say about that? How could you not, Dad, I thought. How could you not admit you didn't believe your own son when he tried to tell you what was happening? And when the hell was I ever going to forgive you for that? Then, if you spoke then, we could have made a substantial difference. Dad took a wheezing breath at the prompt. Why was he not wearing his oxygen again? He began with explanation. Mary and I could not believe a priest would do this, and I now continue to suffer the pains of rebuking my son. I grew up with the notion that our faith was a treasure of joy and hope. Your hideous acts of defilement have destroyed that notion, and I believe so much that man was put on this earth, and that one of the first things we learn in catechism as to why we are here is to know, to love, and to serve God in this world so that we may be with him in the next. Without him, life has no other purpose and will become shallow. He looked at me again. Is this enough? As the good speechwriter, I said, I think we need a conclusion. When did this become an assignment? Perhaps when I made it one. Okay, he said and added, even now, I pray for you and all victims in this act, which I totally blame on the evil one who does exist, the devil. Good Dad. I handed him the letter. He scribbled in broken signature, still recognizable as him. Yours in Christ, Walter.
Thank you so much, Joan. I am, from both of your passages, I am just aching. Like, it is hard to breathe. So for anybody who's watching, you all really need to get these books, I swear. They're just incredible. So I have a couple of questions for you both. I'm mostly curious about the process of writing a memoir, especially memoirs as intimate, exposing, personal as yours are. So I'll get into my first question. Writing personal stories about the people in your life is already difficult in itself, at least for me, a huge people pleaser. Writing anything less than positive about someone who might read it is really difficult for me. But both of your memoirs tackle difficult situations that are super personal for everyone involved. And Joan, that's really you really exhibited that in this passage that you just read about your feelings about your father. And it didn't really exactly paint him in a very good light. Were either of you nervous about writing about your experiences? And how did you move forward despite any nerves or hesitations you might have had? Jan, let's hear from you first.
Okay. I was thinking Joan would go first because she was right there, but happy to go first. Yeah, I think part of it for me was it took me so long to write this. It took me, I really wanted to write it my whole life, which sounds dramatic, and it is, and I never knew if I would be able to. And then once I was actually writing, it took me about 20 years to write it. And in American Bastard, there's a section that I wrote 20 years ago, and it was published in creative nonfiction. But then I put it down because I wasn't able to continue. That wasn't because I was worried about offending someone, but I just wasn't mature enough as a human. I guess that went into it, but I wasn't mature enough to continue. And also I wasn't mature enough as a writer to continue. So I needed to do a lot of therapy, more therapy. I've been in therapy forever, but I needed to work on adoption more and to figure out how to write the book. And I'm really clear, and I tell my students this, whatever we're writing, it's not a place to settle scores. It's not a place for revenge, none of that. So I feel that as long as my my instincts and my goal is true, and my goal really in writing the book was to say what happened, and to talk about the dark side of adoption, which nobody was writing about as far as I could tell, and I was doing a lot of reading about it. So I was trying to be real and true, and there's photographs in my book of my birth mother and father. My birth father is a Canadian hockey player who won 3 Stanley Cups. And so I had to consult a lawyer about that. And what I was told was that since my birth father was a public figure, and that he was not alive by the time this book came out, that was, I would be protected. I was thinking of lawsuits. And with my birth mother, I just needed to get a piece of paper signed by her saying that she was my mother. And I got that. I've only seen her 3 times. So we don't have a relationship. I don't know if she's still alive. So that's how much we don't have a relationship. So I don't think I trashed anyone in this book. They might have a different feeling about what betrayal means or what speaking about things mean. And I know, John, you might have something to share about that sense of speaking and what that means.
Yeah, Joan, how was your experience writing this?
So, like you, Jan, my book began 20 years ago. 2002 was when my brother came forward. 2004 was when we finished the litigation, and we really didn't feel like he made a difference. And I said, well, why don't we tell our story? It was more telling his story at the time, but that's how long it lived. I walked into this through so many doors, but one door that helps me answer this question, Monica, is if I was going to be truthful about other people, I had to be extremely truthful about myself. I had to get into the good and the bad and the ugly of this. Many people could have thought I was going in there for a good deed as a rescuer to save my brother, to save my family. think about the person who thinks so much of herself that she thinks that's her job.
Mm-hmm.
That's the person I had to attack. And I think I did, and I still grapple with my rescuer syndrome. But when I was able to do that to me, I felt I could be honest about the other people in this story. There's an entire generation, my parents' age, of teachers, parents, um, coaches, sisters, other priests, who, if they didn't know what the hell was going on, should have.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to break down if they knew, why they said nothing, and if they didn't know, why the hell didn't they know? So maybe it was easier to do that after attacking my own allegedly pure motives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, I agree with you, Jen. I don't think that you trashed anyone in your book. And Joan, kind of the same thing. You didn't really, I mean, besides the priest, obviously, who needed to be.
And even him got a chance to tell his story.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
like I feel like you approached, like, even those who you were upset with, you approached it with such grace of understanding that they had a different experience, or that they might not have thought of things a certain way or something like that. So there were no, I felt like there were no like sharp edges or like daggers or anything like that in the way that you told these stories. And so I think that's part of why your book is just so beautiful and haunting to me, because you did that with so much grace.
Before both my parents died, they both read earlier versions, post Rome, of the trip. And my mother loved it. And the only thing she was worried about was the state of my marriage. It's like, oh, this is a great book, but are you and Richard okay? And which is how my mom was.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad got angry only about one thing, which I think is actually quite lovely, which was, there was a passage where I'd been driving in the car with him and he said something that was homophobic, and was probably back like in 1996. And when he read it in 2014, he was shocked that he had said that. And to think that he grew so much over time, I mean, that I can tell you he said it because I remember the moment and being shocked myself. But for that to be the thing he was upset about really showed what a loving man he was.
Oh, that is lovely. I'm glad that there was growth there. And that's what he was upset about over those early drafts. So moving on, you both touched upon this a little bit, so I think I'm going to shift kind of the scope of this question a little bit. But both of you describe in such beautiful and exquisite detail your experiences. I was immediately taken by the details and descriptions in Joan's book, from the streets and alleys of Rome, to Jan's book, the poetic, raw emotion in yours. What was it like? So I initially was going to ask, did you always have the intention of writing your experiences? But you've been working on this for 20 years. So what was the experience like as you were kind of fully putting this to paper, putting your experiences to paper? Joan, I know that you had said something about you went to a writing retreat right after your Rome trip. And I feel like that might have helped. Can you tell us about that?
So yeah, I had timed a lot of things perfect in my life, like being able to make the Cubs World Series parade, but that's a separate story. But on this venture, I had scheduled 8-9 days in Rome, and it butted up right against a writing retreat I was doing with Judith Barrington, who wrote From Truth to Art on writing memoirs. Excellent book if people don't have it and they're interested in memoir. So I really had a safe place to fall of a week in Almacera, Spain, on the Costa Brava region, and really had an ability to download. At the time, while I was on this trip, and I don't know about you, Jan, and how you kind of memorialize things, I wrote a lot of notes knowing that this was going to be a book. And I remember the priest thinking this was so nice of me to come talk to him. And I'm like, you don't know who you're talking to. I'm not always that nice. But that said, I really had a very detailed journal, but I also had a lot of photos. and use those quite a bit to rebuild the scenes. So Rome, a lot of that, I call it the present timeline of the story, came during that initial couple of months after the trip.
Incredible. Jen, how about you? I know that you included some photos. So as you were experiencing these moments, were you writing things down, or did you kind of rely on your memory?
Yeah, my memory. I had a lot of trouble writing the book because I couldn't remember a lot of my childhood, and I didn't know how I would write a memoir, and that was a big issue for me. And although I had notes and notes and notes in many journals over the years, so over many years I had been writing anything that just came up about adoption, and some of those notes found their way into poems in my books. I have 6 books of poetry before this, and so I have some poems about adoption, but that's a very different thing than writing memoir. Which has to be true, has to be accurate. And so that was challenging. And one thing that helped me was going to a writer's residency. I went to Brush Creek Ranch in Wyoming, and I was, I thought I was maybe ready to try to put some of it down on paper, but I still didn't know how it was about the structure of it. And I had, just kind of instinctively, I took this book with me, which is it's a topographical dictionary of the West, and it's called Home Ground, A Guide to the American Landscape, and edited by Barry Lopez and Deborah Gortney. And as a young adoptee, I had gotten this this massive dictionary, like it was 12 inches high, from one of my aunts, and it had a red leather cover with these silver rivets, and I loved it. And I kept it in my clothes closet, and I would just read it and make notes as like a weird little kid. And I was reading the encyclopedia and making notes about cities and stuff. And I was alone a lot, let's say. And so I had this, I think part of it is connection to definition as an adoptee, looking for facts, looking for things that are written down that can be proven, not knowing my name till I was 32 years old. So when I went to this residency, I don't know, it was just an instinctive thing. I started with some epigraphs from this dictionary as a way to sort of ground myself, and I used them sort of as a metaphorical leap into something that happened. And that's how the book sort of took shape. It was not a plan I had. It was just something that happened that way. And I think it was my love, my love of the West, my love of definitions. I don't know. But so I didn't plan that structure. So it's kind of wild. Yeah.
Yeah. So that writer's retreat, when was that 20 years ago, or was that more?
Oh no, that was maybe 5 years ago.
Okay. So you crafted, so you put it all on paper, and you realized that this was a book about 5 years ago.
I was hoping it was a book. And then I had like maybe 9 versions of it, nine versions of the manuscript. Then I sent it out for 4 years, and other people didn't think it was a book. And so it took a while to get published.
Yes. Well, it did. For those watching, Jan's book won a Red Hen Press's Nonfiction Award, and it was selected by Nikki Mustaki. And I am so glad that she picked it, because like it's so, the way that you wrote this memoir is just so unlike any memoir that I've ever read before. And I really appreciated that. I loved, and it fits right in with Red Hen's kind of aesthetic, because we love to publish things that are different, but also moving and beautiful and haunting. And it just ticks all those boxes.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, Joan, I know you spoke extensively with your brother Tim about this book, and he's been a huge partner and supporter of this endeavor. I saw him in the comment section of a previous event that we did with you, and I thought that was so sweet. So did you tell or work with anyone else as you crafted this? I know that you probably told your family. And did you receive pushback from anyone?
Yeah, thinking about that question. Well, like Jan, people would say, when I'm a lawyer by day, and when I wasn't lawyering, people would say, "What's Joan doing?" Joan's up there writing. So pretty much everyone knew what I was doing for the past 20 years. I don't think I received pushback. Like I said, I had that one encounter with my dad. That said, I had to be very, very careful with a lot of people's stories. Some people in the story are anonymized for good reason, with enough of their stories changed so people won't recognize them, that the truth of their stories are there. If they read the pages, they would likely see it. There's one woman who was a nun and then left the convent and became a teacher. And I had a long conversation with her. And I really felt, after talking to her and a number of women and men actually of her age range, it felt like a relief to finally tell their story and even their role in it. So I don't know if I would call that pushback, but there were a lot of deep conversations, everybody looking at it from their piece. I looked at myself as kind of the master quilter. My great-grandmother was a great quilter, and I had all these little squares of people's stories that I was trying to get in there. So pushback, no, I wouldn't raise it to the level of gratitude, but perhaps relief. I don't think, I haven't read any book where anyone's looked at clergy sex abuse from a family perspective. I might have missed them, at least I call myself a secondary victim. That's what we're technically called. And I think it's an important story. I think there are a lot of families way too many families that know this, and I hope it reaches them.
Absolutely. I was speaking with your publicist, actually, Joan, about this and about how it was so important that you told your perspective of the story of learning the trauma that your family member went through and dealing with how helpless you felt, but what you could do to help him. And like, it just really resonated with me. I know people who have been on that kind of end of the spectrum, where they witnessed something that was traumatic to their family member, and then they didn't really know what to do or how to feel. And it was just such an interesting perspective that I'd never really thought about before. A lot of memoirs, especially of this nature, are from the victims. Mm-hmm. And so to read a memoir about the sister of a victim, I feel like really just hit me so much. So the work that you put in, and I totally agree that I do feel like you're a master quilter. Like you weaved all of these stories and all of these perspectives and all of the interviews that you gave and people that you talked to, you weaved it all so intricately and so well. So thank you so much for doing that. Jan, similar question. In your conversations with your birth parents, as you were interacting with them, did you tell them that you were a writer? Did you ever mention that you might be writing about this at some point?
No. I didn't tell them I was a writer. Well, it's been a long while since I met them. I met my birth father once, but I was a writer back then. No, I didn't talk to them about that. There was, other kind of major questions I was asking, like, how did this happen? Like, where did I come from? Kind of questions. And who are you? And no. And I didn't want to tell them I wasn't writing the book at that time. I didn't know I was writing the book. And except when I needed to get that piece of paper from my birth mother, I knew what I was doing then. and there was no way I was going to tell her I was writing a book because she wouldn't have signed the piece of paper.
Mm.
I know she wouldn't have. I just asked her. I said, I need you to sign a piece of paper saying that you're my mother. And she said, I don't want to do that.
Mm.
And this is my third meeting with her, and I had been afraid. I had been very afraid the first couple meetings, and as I got older and more confident, and I said, look, I've never asked you for anything. I need you to sign this, and she did.
Oh my God.
I never really pushed her on anything. I was afraid to, until that last meeting, and because she just was like a brick wall. She was not going to give me any information,
God.
and
Yeah.
she was just like sobbing most of the time. And I felt bad for her, and I wanted information, so it was a difficult situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, goodness. All right, moving on to a little bit of a more cheerful topic, I guess.
I don't think we have any.
Yeah.
I did know, I was, as we were starting this and I was listening to you reading, I was like, this is not going to be a very cheerful event, is it? Which is totally fine. Like, writing needs to be painful.
Mhm.
Like, that's how you know it's good. So what I love about both of your books is how you choose to structure them. Jan, you're an accomplished poet, and I noticed that your memoir is structured so much like a series of poems, with the language and even the way that it's laid out on the page, with indents and line breaks and almost stanzas. And Joan, you mixed history and memory with the present plot line of your journey to Rome, which really kind of gave so much added dimension and layers to the entire journey. And I am fascinated. I ask this question to all of our poets, because I'm always fascinated about the decisions that a writer makes to when they're putting together their books or their collections or their memoirs, and how they weave the stories together to tell this particular story, past and present as one. So I would love to dive into your thought processes as you structured your books. Let's do Joan first.
Well, my structure goes all the way back to Odysseus and the Odyssey, which is basically I borrowed from the greats, or I should say Homer, and used a tactic I've read in Beverly D'Onofrio's works, Patricia Hampel, is it Cheryl Strayed, Jack Kerouac, J.R. Tolkien, which is use a quest as your timeline. Mm-hmm. So with that quest, I could move the reader through, in essence, a week, but go back and forth, thank goodness, with wingdings and white space in time. So I did it take a while to come up with that structure? Yeah, I should have thought of it sooner with all the great works that came before. But I will tell you this, I've been working on this book. I got my MFA and it was my master's thesis. And many people said, well, are you going to publish it? And it was only after the end of writing that I realized this isn't the story. This isn't what Joan does. Joan's not done. So that I didn't get this approach to it until my decision was made to go try to find him. But once that happened, I had other people to rely on, and I read a lot. I hope, and I know Jan must too, as an instructor. I mean, reading is the most important thing for a writer, in my book.
Yeah. Jan, how about you?
Well, respectfully, I'm going to disagree with you, Monica. I feel like my memoir is totally, it may be lyrical at times, but I feel like it's totally different than poetry. It doesn't feel like my poems at all. And they feel like clear they're paragraphs, they're not stanzas, and it feels totally different to me. But if it feels that way to you, great. But
Yeah.
but
So I mean, so you didn't have obviously you didn't really have a purpose or a what's it called? A conscious kind of decision to make it poetic. It was kind of just how you wrote.
no,
Yeah.
no. No, I was writing a memoir, but and at the first couple versions of the memoir had more poetry in it. There are some poems in there, some actual poems in there, and which are some of my poems from previous books, but and they are reformatted for this. They're not in the same format as they originally appeared. But I realized that I needed to get those poems out of there because this is not poetry. This is a memoir. And also when I was trying to get it published, when I was first sending out, I ran into I got some referrals to some good editors, and they all said the same thing. They said, this is powerful, this is harrowing, but we want it to be chronological. And I said, I can't make it chronological. I can't remember a lot of my childhood, and I don't want it to be chronological. And then I worked with one of my friends who's in New York, and he's an editor, and I trust him. And he's also a poet. And he said, why don't you put yourself on a train, because there's a lot of trains in here, and have things happen from the train. I said, if I did that, yeah, I could do that, but I'd want to kill myself then, because I hate that idea. And and I have a big resistance to traditional structure, and I really do. And so in poetry also, but what I did do was move a couple things up in the book to maybe have a sense of a spine in the book that was maybe a little more chronological. I was willing to do that. And also I talked to the writer Sinead Gleason, a really great Irish writer, and she said, these editors you're talking to, are they men? And I said, oh, yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. And usually I'm very aware of that, but these were references, and I was trying to get read, and I wasn't thinking about it. She said, why don't you try some women? I said, yeah. And I sent to Red and Kate Gale and Nikki Mistaki came through, and I think that I'm not saying only women will pick something instinctual or, but all I kept running into was chronology, and I knew I was not going to deliver on that. So
that is so interesting, and I love that you were adamant not to give in to that, because that it is your vision. And I love that I love that I love your little point about the women editors and kind of how we tend to just get it, we understand. I wonder what that says. I won't say anything about that. Just leave that be. I had a follow-up question for Joan. I was really curious. So in each kind of section, when you're kind of going back and forth and stuff, I noticed that some points, some of the little paragraphs are split. So you kind of separated them, and you kind of go back and forth to the same two situations. And I always wonder when that happens. Do you write the entire situation A and situation B, and then you just cut them up, or how does that work?
I'm certain it was that. Everything pre-Rome was written in some sort of let's tell this story. Now, obviously, if I'm writing a story about, recently I wrote about a chicken of mine dying, and it brought back memories of death. So if I was a death of my parents, actually. So if a thought takes me to the something deeper, I'm going to go there. But I would, in the writing process, I would do one story first. And then look for the quilting, right? Where do these where do these come together?
Yeah. Another follow-up question for both of you. I noticed that both of you also separated your memoirs into sections. So what are the kind of reasons, or why did you make certain decisions to like plop things into each section and then structure the sections in the way that you did? Jan, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, that just happened when I was writing it, and I don't know. I've always I have done a lot of reading of memoirs, as John referenced, and I'm not a long. It may not seem like it, but I'm not a long talker. I'm not a really detailed talker, and I like this idea of metaphorical leaping a lot. And so in other memoirs, for example, in Another Bullshit Night in Suck City, I really like that memoir. And I like the structure of that. I like short leaping sections, and I like uneven sections, and I like sections where something happens, something happens out of time. It's just something that appeals to me and makes more sense to me. And so I think it's just, I don't know that I could have done it any other way, unless I was writing something that demanded it. I mean, as I'm sure Joan would agree, I mean, once we write this book, we're serving the book, we're serving what the book needs. And so it does really no good to say this is the memoir I'm going to write, and this is how I'm going to write it, because it never works out that way anyway. So you see what the book sort of needs.
Mm-hmm. Jan, how about you? How did you decide the second?
Well, it was interesting to get Jan's take about how, as a poet, she wasn't using poetry features. But for me, when I was writing this, I thought of it as movements, because I knew that with this story, I would have to give me some pause in writing it and readers some pause in digesting it. So, I looked to themes to basically tell the story. Like when I decided to leave, why I decided to leave, that was placed in Alaska. So I'm going to focus on the Chinook winds. A chapter called Pencil Erasers was really about my mother, and the way she dealt with bad things was to erase them. And I gathered it all up. So that kind of helped weave the story of everybody, right? Everything she discarded, I took. And then when I would go to Chicago, I would take her things. I would take pictures. I would take albums. Talking about what was left of my faith life. That came in a chapter called Sola Fide, Only Faith, and allowed me then to get into the history of Catholicism and Lutheranism and how women were really removed from leadership in the Catholic Church, which is what I blame on to me, that's the initial cause, which is early women were leaders in early Christianity. And they rewrote the book of Timothy, the epistles, after St. Paul died. It wasn't St. Paul's work to diminish women. And I really wanted to get that across. So movements, themes, rest for the readers, because they had a lot to digest. I know I went to Breadloaf for this at one point, and Scott Russell Sanders, was my mentor, and he just said, "Man, this is thick," and I know what he meant about that, and I'm like, okay, I have to make it as light as I can.
Oh, that's so great. I love that. Okay, we are running up against time. I have one last question, which is, what is your advice for new memoirists who are trying to do what you're doing but may be scared? Jan, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really my advice to writers really is, I tell my students, it seems so simple, the advice, but doing it is not, is just, no matter what happens, don't quit, don't stop, because a lot of things are going to come up that get in your way, and there's going to be a lot of resistance from the world, whether it's you don't have the time, you don't have the money, the story seems impossible, I can't write this, why did I think I was a writer, whoever told me I could write? It's like the internal censor comes up, and life comes up big time, and that's really it. And I would tell people to go to therapy even if they don't need it. I would tell them to go right now, and because when you do need it, it's really hard to find somebody when you're in trouble. So I would go get that relationship going right now. And poetry's not therapy, writing's not therapy, writing is writing. So I would just say, don't quit. Get some support from other writers, and get a writing group. And that's all. And don't mess with that question. Am I a writer? Am I going to do this? Just say, yeah, yes, I am. Yeah, I'm going to do it. Okay, that's done. Let's go to the next question.
I love that. I love that. Joan, how about you?
I'm going to grab a little bit of what Jan just said there and then segue into what I wanted to say. The last talk we did, I told people I call myself a writer and a lawyer. I never call myself a lawyer first, because I want to claim who I am as a person, and that's a writer. And if anyone is thinking of writing and has a passion of writing and doesn't think they're a writer and they're listening to this, I want you to take a piece of paper right now and write, I am a writer, and identify yourself as that. You got to believe it in here first. The other thing I would say is the advice my mentor, Judith Barrington, gave me when she wrote Memoir from Truth to Art, which was, I'm going to swear, I don't think she swore, but it was open the goddamn door. So when my brother was being abused, I was in the hallway. I knew something wrong was happening, and I didn't open the door then. And I spent many years trying to write his story. Right? Can't write his story. I got to write mine without opening the door. But I still had to open the door. I had to open his door, and I had to open my door of who I am and why this is what I am doing. So open your door.
That is beautiful. I'm so inspired. I always kind of love doing these kind of craft type discussions, because it just inspires me. I'm also a writer. I write mostly fiction, but there have been things that have happened to me that maybe I'll write a memoir about.
Well, I'm going to start calling you Monica Franz, writer and media manager.
Yeah, maybe I should change my signature. That'll be it. Yeah.
Okay.
But thank you both so much for joining us tonight. This was such an incredible conversation. I really enjoyed it. It was really raw and emotional, but also so passionate and just so incredible. I learned so much. So thank you both so much. We will see you next time. I have a couple of closing remarks, but I'll take you guys off screen. And if anybody has any questions for our guests, feel free to shoot them some emails or shoot me an email and I'll send it over to them. But please buy their books, and I'll say a little bit more about that in just a second. But thank you so much, Joan and Jan. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Okay.
All right. Oh, that was incredible. I really enjoyed that. So don't forget, we are having a bit of a sale. So if you purchase a copy of American Bastard or the Book of Timothy tonight, you will get a bonus free book, a surprise book in your package. So I'm dropping the link right now. Buy these books now. I swear to you, you need to buy them. Our final Hen House event will be a celebration spectacular featuring over 25 contributors from Red Hen's New Moons anthology, featuring work exclusively from contemporary North American Muslims. And in partnership with anthology editor Kazem Ali, we will be celebrating their work and this incredible anthology with a 2-hour reading special. Please join us and help us usher this incredible book into the world. We'll be doing this event on Zoom on November 3rd at 4 p.m. Pacific. You'll be able to find the link to that starting tomorrow at redhen.org/virtual. But it'll also be streamed live to our YouTube channel and Facebook. So if you don't want to join us on Zoom, that's totally fine. You can watch however you're watching now. Thank you again for joining us. We hope to see you at our annual benefit champagne luncheon on Sunday. It's on Zoom this year, don't worry. More info can be found at redhen.org/benefit. Tickets are still available, and be sure to check out our incredible auction items as well. You can find that on our benefit page as well. If we don't see you Sunday, we hope to see you soon. November is filling up with events. Actually, we have an in-person event with Jan herself sometime in November 12th. More info on that also on our website. Keep your eyes peeled. Follow us on social media for the latest news. We are at Red Hen Press on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you again so much. Have a great rest of your evening. Maybe have a drink after this really tough conversation. But buy these books. I cannot stress enough. You need to get them. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.